Blow your horn in the beginning. Get him to blow his horn in the beginning.
Okay, will you blow the horn? Put the paper down a little bit.
I really like a cheesy grin. Okay, so we're giving a minute here. We just went through Scott Drexler's sentencing. Here, we'll show what's going on over here. Okay. All right, so we go into the courtroom, and the first thing I noticed is there were 3 people in the pretrial probation area, so I thought that was interesting. Also, I only saw maybe one federal officer on the other, not federal officer, BLM agent, federal worker over on the other side. So that was a couple things that I noticed. We had a full one side of our courtroom. That was good. Many less marshals, a nicer atmosphere. So we go into the pretrial sentencing, the PSR report, and she does the regular asking if there's anything not valid in there. I did note that she said that this could be used for other purposes, such as the prisons, like she said before, but also for Homeland Security and the IRS. So apparently this report goes down on his permanent record, can be brought back up and used for just about anything. They start him off at a base level 14, plus 3 levels for the officers or employees of the federal government being the victims. That brings him to a 17, minus 2 levels for the acceptance of the plea deal, minus 1 level again for the acceptance and working with the government, letting them know that he took the plea deal is what it went through. Can they hear me on that one?
I don't know.
You might want to go a little closer. Okay, they talk about a couple of his arrests and convictions, but his conduct doesn't really add any more points, so that he ends on a level 14. They brought up a lot of different things in his criminal record, such as a DUI, just charging a firearm in city limits. It was very minimal. What was like $100 fine, a couple dogs at large, couple seatbelt infractions. They brought all of those things up in the courtroom. I thought that was quite interesting.
All work related.
Yeah, a couple, big rig, little bit overweight, little too high infractions that they also brought up, but they said none of that added to his sentencing. The prosecution says with a 14 category 1, the recommended is a 12-month sentence. That's the high end. The PSR report recommended for time served, 1 year supervised release. Fine amount could be $4,000 to $40,000. Restitution is not applicable in this case. Then we go into the government's narrative. Nadia Ahmed and Stephen Myrie were in the room today. And of course, they went through a Class A misdemeanor, but that's not really what we're here for. And they go back through the indictment and about all the different things that he did. His serious conduct and that the need to protect the community and protect the law enforcement employees. So what they're saying is he's got, giving him time served is illegal. They cite a case. What is the case here? Where did I write that down? Well, I'll get to that later. That he is not remorseful of his assault. What drove him to the officers on the bridge. When he got into Bunkerville, there were no officers, so he went out in search of these officers. They show his longbow video, which was only put into the first trial, not into the second trial, and they say, before they show it, they talk about his testimony. And what his testimony was and then show the longbow video, testimony on the record. But the longbow video is not his testimony on the record, so that was a little confusing. And so they said what Mr. Drexler told us under oath was, and they post the cover photo, which says, "When all else fails, vote from the rooftops." Picture of him prone. The truck was too far for him to go and put his gun away in the truck, which that's not what he said in testimony. He said that it was someone else's truck and he was not going to leave his weapon where anyone else could get to it, because that is unsafe with your firearms. That is what he said in the second trial. But here they're saying that the truck was just too far away to go put his weapon down in. But it wasn't too far away to go get a blanket and put underneath of his arm, is what the government is saying. That he celebrates what he did that day. He celebrates it with tattoos. They bring up his booking photo with the tattoos that says Bundy Ranch and the 2 mine operations. They said it doesn't matter if he's a good son and he's a good neighbor. There's no doubt in our mind he is a danger to federal officers. His disrespect and disregard for the lives of these people, the federal officers. Then they bring up the pictures of the jury nullification shirts. And they say that the PSR report is incorrect and possibly illegal. They would be happy to recommend jail time, the prosecution, but they said in lieu of that, we think that the 5 years of probation would be good. So the judge says, please elaborate on how that is illegal. And they said U.S. versus Nicholas in a Sixth Circuit case. And I believe what they were saying in this Sixth Circuit case, and they kind of ran through it really quickly, but it was a person that was charged with multiple different counts. He was serving for one count, so that it was illegal to give him time served because that time was serving with another count. It didn't seem that the judge was very impressed by their motion and their arguments. So Leventhal then gets up and he says, listen, we've heard from the people. We've heard from the juries. The juries, 2 different juries. That count 1, not guilty. Count 2, not guilty, and so on. He said count 6, hung jury, hung by 1 person. They go on through all of the other counts. Count 10, 11, 12, 14, not guilty. So what the people and what the jury have said here is that he's not guilty of these actions. They're not seeing it like the prosecution is seeing it. And he was hung on 1 person. He said that we could have continued going into trial, but some things had happened and we were a little tired and they decided to take this, probation came to them with a misdemeanor. He said if probation believes that this man is such a danger, why did they offer him a misdemeanor plea deal? Then the judge asks the PSR people and they said, well, what do you think about giving him time served? Do you think time served is illegal? And he said, well, you know, we could definitely, you know, give him the year and then let the BOP decide what time is served and what time isn't served. But we feel that that would be a misuse of government time and employee time to figure out how much time we all know he's already served here. And they were thinking that if they did the time served, it would avoid the Bureau of Prisons having to go through all of this again. Leventhal said if you took a step back from what happened at Bunkerville that day, you would realize that regular people were being abused. And the question is, who really is the victim? He objects to the entire sentencing memorandum put forth by the government. How does this go? Government offer him a misdemeanor if he's this worst person that they believe. He said, I met Scott Drexler in October of October of 2016. That he met them in Pahrump. He was eating a sandwich and he was sickened by what he was eating. He was subject to strip searches. He was subject to all those things and it was a horrible time. He says, during the year that he's been out, they have agreed and done everything they were stipulated to in the pretrial release. He said so much so that every time you said that Eric and Scott could not talk to each other unless a lawyer was present, So every time that they wanted to talk to each other, Leventhal had to do a three-way call. So much so that he motioned to let them be able to talk to each other because they were complying so well. He said political theories are, or this is the judge. He said nonetheless, the difficult conduct to reconcile here. And she goes on to talk about the jury nullification shirts and the threatening of violence. And she said, everyone gets upset by things. And it's frustrating to be writing the president and sending messages and not knowing if your words are being heard. And she understands that. But going to violence or threats of violence is not a appropriate way to deal with things. And these federal officers, many of these people in their jobs, are regular people just like you and me. And she hoped that from then on, Scott would be able to reconcile his differences in other ways and see these officers as regular people. And she went on a long time to talk about how these, the lands changed a lot. She said, even during these times, some has gone back into state control, some has gone into federal control. She talked about all that. And it kind of sounded like she understood, that they're upset politically with some of these things going on, but that violence was never the, advocating violence is never the answer. So she sentenced him to credit time served, no supervised probation, because he had already done the year pre-trial. So then the government got up and said that they wished to dismiss the indictment for Scott Drexler. So I found that they kind of tried to squeeze that under. I found that very interesting. She talked about his further rights, that he had signed some rights away talking about the plea, but that he still had certain rights and that he had a right to appeal. They set a hearing for November 8th and another hearing for November 16th. Those are hearings that if everything doesn't go well or he wants to appeal, they can go in. It sounds like it's just paperwork hearings so that he can get through this. They are not seeking restitution. They are not seeking a fine. And they are not seeking his, what is that called? When his property is turned over. They're not seeking to keep his property. What is that called? Property being turned over.
No,
forfeiture. They're not seeking forfeiture of his property. So at this time, it seems like it was a good time in there today, this morning. We come back at 1 o'clock for Eric Parker to see if that goes the same way. I know that he's, wanted a little bit more, and I know the government's going to throw stuff at him. So here we're hoping to see that his actions, since he has been out, and all of those things are help her make a decision to see that these guys are good neighbors, these guys are good fathers, and we get to move on with our lives. Thank you all so much.